I have been associated with Iwraw Asia Pacific since its inception as a member of the advisory committee. And at that time, the whole concept of women's issues being linked to human rights was, in a sense, novel, particularly for this region, for the Asia Pacific region.
Iwraw Asia Pacific was set up in 1993 by women from the Global South to address gaps in linking standard settings and implementation of CEDAW at the ground level. It is the key non-governmental organization providing support and coordination to NGOs to engage with the CEDAW review processes. In the past 22 years, Iwraw Asia Pacific has worked with groups in more than 140 countries in various regions for the CEDAW review process. This is an overview of its work with stakeholders and target groups in the past 4 years. The organization has conducted shadow report workshops and assisted national groups in submitting their shadow report to the CEDAW committee from the following countries. Post-CEDAW review sessions, Iwraw Asia Pacific continues to support its stakeholders in implementation of the concluding observation through facilitation of face-to-face dialogue for NGOs with governments, national human rights commissions, or women's machineries. Such dialogue could be thematic or general in nature depending on the needs of the national groups. Iwraw Asia Pacific also engages in consistent follow-up and capacity building on thematic priorities identified from time to time. These have ranged from conflict, constitution drafting processes, migration, women's economic, social, and cultural rights, sexual orientation and gender identity, women in sex work and drug use, business, and human rights. Since 2010, Iwraw Asia Pacific is pursuing a holistic litigation strategy, which includes training for lawyers, judicial officers, and dialogue with judges from various countries. It also includes follow-up technical support for drafting and filing of cases before the national courts, as well as international treaty bodies such as CEDAW and ICESCR. Last but not the least, the organization has pursued a focused strategy on law and policy reform through its partners in South and Southeast Asia. This initiative applies the CEDAW lens of non-discrimination and substantive equality to help analyze and formulate new laws and policies in addressing concerns of women's human rights.
Iwraw has really helped my work, and particularly in the area of law reform. Following the coups in 2002 and 2010, Iwraw created a space for me through the UN CEDAW mechanism to be able to share the issues that women in my country were facing. One of the direct results of that intervention in 2002 was legislative reform around family law. As a result of lobbying and getting the CEDAW committee to put pressure on the Fiji government, we were able to advocate for changes to law reform in Fiji, and as a result, we now have quite a progressive Family Law Act 2004. So, 2 years after our intervention at the CEDAW process that happened.
Iwraw Asia Pacific is really the non-governmental organization that has helped to foster the process of bringing women's rights home to women, not only in the Asian region but really around the world, because they have helped to non-governmental organizations to influence the CEDAW process and make it a very critical investigation of government practices, and they have also linked to non-governmental organizations in a variety of countries around the world, and they have really helped a lot to make CEDAW a reality. This is, for me, a focus of my research. I have really found Iwraw Asia Pacific to be the outstanding actor of, facilitating that process. So I from an academic perspective, consider the work of IWRA Asia Pacific paramount.
There was enormous capacity gap in understanding about the treaty, what it meant, what the state obligation was. In this area, IWRA Asia Pacific is pioneering in connecting with women's groups, with women's movements, and helping to carry the standard setting in CEDAW into actual implementation processes at the national level. They facilitated that in an extraordinarily creative way, particularly through their global to local program.
Because IWRA Asia Pacific has such a great relationship with the committee members, that transcended onto us as well. They were greeting us, they were willing to talk to us, our avenues of being able to give them information or giving them feedback were open, mostly because of the relationship of IWRA Asia Pacific. And especially with the UN staff as well, because we got a lot more space because of that than I think we would have done if we'd come on our own.
For me, it's the first very close encounter with CEDAW review process, and I finally got the understanding what does it mean actually, starting from point A until the final country dialogue and follow-ups and what's the whole scope of the whole process, how it goes. So it was very important for me.
In 2010, IWRA also supported my participation in the Universal Periodic Review, and 6 months later I was able to also represent Fiji at its second appearance at the CEDAW Committee. Because I was at the UPR process, I was able to link some of the recommendations that came out of the UPR and also use that to push the CEDAW agenda during the 2010 process. And one of the key results that came out of that was calling for elections. And so, last November we had our first elections in 8 years, and this has really been really came about as a result of IWRA supporting the work of myself and the organization that I represent. And this meant that women, the women that I represent or that I was speaking on behalf of, were able to fulfill their rights that are covered under the CEDAW Convention.
From my position in the Ministry of Women's Affairs, we work according to our mission, position, and of course it's linked to the response to the CEDAW. And I'm very clear now that we have to prove, and we have to have an indicator to ensure that yes, women have access, have opportunity, and have received the impact from what we are doing and responding.
In addition to creating this capacity building in the women's movement, also to help to monitor progress through on state obligation, IWRA has helped the committee's work in preparing its general recommendations. IWRA played an important point in bringing together expertise to carry voice on the content of the discrimination. It's an extraordinary general recommendation, perhaps one of the best of the general recommendations. And I think in that sense, that standard setting, the fleshing out of standards, making them comprehensive, the contribution that it has made is really pioneering.